Today we're going to be working on a round design in foam. The round design is important in floral design because it is the basis of all other shapes. It helps you to learn how to use line as a principle of design. And once you start to understand how to use line, you can make any shape that you want. So these are the materials that you need for one design. Now for our class, you're going to be making two designs. One along with this video, probably taking quite a bit of time, and then a second one to practice. So in our case, you need one container. You're going to be using a green plastic round container, 1/3 block of floral foam, bowl tape, which is a sticky tape that's either green or clear. It is not the same as stem wrap or floral tape that doesn't have adhesive on it. 5 stems of leatherleaf fern, 3 stems of a second green. In our case today, it's Italian ruscus. 3 stems of mini carnations, 2 stems of pom-pom cushions, and 2 stems of filler. So I've broken this presentation into 2 days that would take about 45 minutes each. Of course, you can do this all at once. It just depends on your schedule. So day 1 is materials, prep, and greening. Greening establishes the size and shape of our design. So you're going to put water in a bucket, sink, or other large container. Make sure wherever you are putting the water is clean. So if you're using a sink, you would want to clean it out so there are not bacteria left there. But try not to have a lot of harsh chemicals left there either that might damage the flowers. If you have flower food, add it. We will do that in the classroom. If you don't have flower food, you can certainly work without it. It just extends the vase life of our flowers. So this is your floral foam, and you should always cut before you soak your foam, because if you don't cut your foam, let's say then you end up only needing half of a brick of foam, then you're throwing money away. You cannot restore it or use it later. It's meant for that moment. So in this case today, you should cut your block of foam into thirds, and you can see that there are some handy little lines on there to help you do that. Then it's time to soak your foam. When you do that, you just place the foam on top of the water. Do not push it or force it down into the water. If you do that, if you force it under the water, what happens is that air pockets form in the middle of the foam. And then if a stem ends up right in that air pocket, of course that flower is going to die very soon. It has no water source. So floral foam is very much like a sponge. And so the flowers are able to pull the water from the foam to keep themselves alive for a longer period of time. These are your hard goods. You have this plastic round container, and it has some blunt points in the bottom to help hold that foam in place. So after you've left your foam in the water for about 3 to 5 minutes, and it has soaked on its own, then you'll take it out and you will push it down onto those spikes to hold it in place. Now, because it's good practice, we are also going to tape this foam in place. And so this is the bowl tape that I was talking about here on the right. Go to the next slide and you will see how to tape it. So we want to make an offset cross to hold this foam in place. You'll notice from the side view, we don't bring that tape really far down on the container, only as far as it has to be to secure the foam, because eventually you have to cover all of these mechanics. We don't even want anyone to notice this plastic container. We definitely don't want them to see any foam, and we don't want them to see any tape. So you'll use your greens and your flowers to cover all of that, but don't make your job harder by using this really long piece of tape. We want the cross here to be offset so that we have access to the center of the block of foam. That's important for the design that we're making. Just a side note here, cut every stem before you put it in the foam. If you're not cutting, you're cheating your customer. And fresh cuts equal a longer vase life. So you should be cutting, sticking, cutting, sticking, cutting, sticking. Always get into that practice. All right, here's the first thing you need. You need 6 tips of leatherleaf fern, and ideally these will be straight and pointed. So this is probably the actual point from the very top of the fern that you want. Find 6 of those And you'll see on the right about how much of that you're going to cut off, and you'll see it on the next slide as well. So these are your first 2 lines that you're creating. They're coming straight out from the middle of the foam, and they should be the same distance out from the center on each side. We want them to be equal to each other. So at this point, if you're not standing, you need to stand. Good floral designers stand. In fact, we don't even take chairs into the lab part of our classroom. The reason you need to stand is so that you can see the shape that you're creating, and you need to look over the top of your design. You can't make it all looking from the side and expect it to be right. So the tips of your leather leaf should be about 1.5 to 2 times the width of the container. That's our rule of proportion. So the whole design should be about twice as wide as the container itself. On the right, please notice that you should put these pieces in straight from the sides. They should be resting on the side of the container or on the edge of the container. The biggest mistake that new designers make with this design is they want to angle everything on the top of the block of the foam like it fell out of an airplane and stuck down into the top of the foam. And that will not achieve the look that we need it to from the side. So this is a centerpiece that we're making, and people would typically sit at a table and they'd be looking from the side at this. So the sides are really important to us. Oops. All right, then you're going to put in 2 more tips on the other side. Everything right now should be equal length from the block of foam. So again, be sure you're standing up, looking over the top. Make sure it's all about the same size coming out of the block of foam. There are our first 4 pieces. Now using lateral leaves, and you'll see in the left-hand picture what I mean by that. Lateral is a leaf that's coming off of the main stem on the side. We are going to add diagonals on each top corner of the block of foam. In the middle picture, I'm trying to show you that when I say the corner of the foam, you actually come in a little bit from the corner. If you put it right on the corner of that foam, that's a weak spot for that material, and your foam will likely break before you're done. So make sure you come in maybe a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch from the corner of the foam when you put in your diagonals. If you look on the right, you can see our 4 original greens. So this one is splitting the difference between 2 of those, coming out a diagonal out of the block of foam. Here are our 4 diagonals when they're put on top of the corner of the foam. Next step is to put 2 tips in the center of the foam to establish height. So they're not coming straight up and down because that's not the natural way that a fern would grow. They have a little angle to them, but they are right in the center of the foam facing each other. It looks like I'm showing you my muscles here, but really I'm showing you a rule of thumb for floral design. And that is when you are making a centerpiece, you put your elbow on the table and make a fist, and your design should never be taller than your fist. And the reason is because a centerpiece goes in the center of a table. People will be talking all around it and across it. And if it's taller than your fist, they can't see each other. That's basically where eye line is when people are sitting at a table. So if your design is in their way, they're just going to move it. And then your effort was really for nothing. It's no longer enhancing that event. So make sure that you always have height in mind. Of course, the centerpiece we're making will eventually look like the one here on this table. It's much shorter than that, but this is just a good thing for us to talk about as we make a centerpiece. Okay, so we've put in our skeleton greens. Those were the first 10 greens. And now nothing goes out farther than those skeleton greens because those have established your height and width. And so we want to stay within those boundaries so that this ends up to actually be a round design. All right, at this point, you should add more leather leaf to fill in spaces all around the foam. Do save 1 stem of leather until the end of greening, like until the very end of the design. Because if we use everything right now and we make a mistake, we have nothing to fall back on. So set aside one piece. You can use imperfect leaves now. If you have some, like on the left, I'm showing you one that lost its tip. Just put that towards the bottom. If you have crooked greens, put those towards the bottom and they won't be as noticeable. Just remember, stay inside your original 10 greens. Don't go out farther than those. You're kind of mirroring what you've already done. So for example, on the right, you can see we have this green coming out on the bottom right corner. And then I mirrored it. I came up a little bit, gave a little space, and then I put another one right above that. Do leave some space between your greens. If you stack them so tightly, you'll run out. You won't have enough. So go ahead and leave some space. We have other product to still put in. Everything should be radiating from the center of this design, just as a real fern would grow. And I guess if you don't know how a real fern grows, take a moment and go look for one, Google one. Okay, when you're finished with your leather leaf, you should do some quality control before you move on. There may still be some foam showing. There most likely will be. That's okay. Just make sure that it looks like all the sides of your design have about the same amount of this product. Then again on the right, be sure you're standing up. Look at your design from the top. It should look equal on all sides and it should look roundish. Now it's never going to look like a perfect circle because we are using points to create this idea of a round shape. But you know basically what something round looks like. All right, add the second green. So for our second green, we're using Italian Ruscus. And we're using this to cover more foam and to add texture. We believe it gives a more interesting, richer, deeper look if we use 2 greens instead of just 1. A little more fun for the eye. So with the Italian Ruscus, you're going to use lateral leaves. And so you can see on the left what that would mean. You're going to take a lateral off that main stem, cut it, of course, and then insert it wherever you see foam. Your goal here is to cover the foam as much as possible and to get your Italian Ruscus evenly spaced throughout the design. So this is what it might look like on the left when you're finished with your second green. Now, if you notice that anything is sticking out farther than it should, maybe one side looks like it has more Ruscus than another, now is the time to take those greens out, cut them again, and then reinsert and make everything as round and even as you can. Take time to do that right now. It'll save you a lot of heartache later. At this point, super important step. Pick up your design and hold it at eye level, like I'm showing you here on the right. And then turn it around and see, is all the foam covered? If it's not, we have more materials to put in. But ideally, we would want it all we want our mechanics to start disappearing. We don't want to see any foam at the end. In the classroom, we have a product called Leaf Shine. This was not sent home with you. Leaf Shine does a couple of things. First, it makes your leaves shiny, just like the name says. It kind of takes away all those water spots, imperfections, makes everything look fresher. But it also is a sealant. It's an oil that will help to seal the leaves. So transpiration is loss of water through the plants of a leaf, or the leaves of a plant. And we don't want our designs to transpire very much because then they will dry out. So this helps to seal them. At this point, you should water your foam. So just take your design over to a sink, put the faucet at the lip of the container, and put some water in there. Remember, the foam is like a sponge, and so if you don't water it, it will eventually pull the water from the leaves back into the foam, and that will make your design look bad sooner. If you're stopping here because you're finished greening, then you should store this in a cool place if at all possible. If you want to keep going, we'll do our next step. So this is the next part. This will take you half an hour, I would say, to do. It takes a little less time than greening typically. And this is when we put in our flowers, our filler, and we finish the whole thing. So at this point, we're going to use pom-pom buds to create lines with flowers. We created lines with greens. Now we're going to create lines with flowers. So you follow the same lines you made with your first greens. On our left-hand picture here, the bud is on the right. It's smaller and closed. We have an open flower on the left. We want to use buds because they're straighter. They look more like a line. So there are our first 4 buds in the right-hand picture. And those are just following those first 4 greens that you put in the shape of a cross. Here's another view of it. These are still the first 4 buds. Notice that the flowers are parallel to the table. Remember, don't airdrop everything from the top. We need some flowers on the side. Keep your flowers out almost as far as the greens. So on the right, you can see the tip of that very first piece of leather is a little farther out. But a person didn't walk into our shop and say, I want to buy greens typically. So we want to keep the flowers out far enough so that all that color shows. So be very careful not to stick all your flowers way into the center of the greens. Leave them out far. Next step, add 2 buds or open flowers if you have to the top to establish height. So in my example here, on my particular stems of pom-poms, I didn't have a lot more buds. So I went ahead and put 2 open flowers there at the top. So they're kind of back to back, and they're not exactly the same height because by varying the height, we make this look more natural. It's more 3-dimensional. It's not quite as perfect. And so it lends more interest and depth to the design. As you may have guessed, now we're going to do 4 diagonal pom-poms. Here we should use big open flowers, and you follow your original diagonals. So figure out where the corners of the block of foam are, where you put those diagonal greens, and these open pom-poms would go on top of that in those same angles as your original greens. After that, you look from the side of your block of foam, and you should be able to find a triangle of pom-poms. 2 open ones, those are the diagonals, and then the 1 bud that was your first line. And then you take an open carnation and you stick it in the center of that triangle and do that on all 4 sides of your design. After that, you can add the rest of the mini cards that you have available for this design. And you want to put those throughout the design. You're adding color now and mass. So in my example here, I want to make sure I get that peach color on every side of the design and hopefully on every angle of the design too. So as we're looking at it, there's actually a big green hole right in the middle of that design. Don't worry about that. There might be some holes right now. We will fill those in just a minute. So make sure you put some of your flowers up high, some down low. Not all the flowers should end up on the top. They shouldn't all end up in a row. They should be evenly spaced throughout the design. You can use both the buds and the open flowers of your carnations. Don't throw those little green buds away because those add a different texture and even a different color to your design. All right, time for filler. So what you do with your filler flower, in this case Misty, is that you put it wherever you have what we call holes. And that might be a place where you're only seeing green. There's no color, it's just green. It looks like a large area where you have nothing, like a hole. Again, space your filler evenly throughout your design. We don't want one side to be really heavy with filler and the other very light. Okay, so at this point, you're ready to do some quality control. So stand up, view your design from the top, and by the way, take a photo. The questions you're asking yourself here are, is it round in shape? Did it turn out pretty even like a circle, or is it lopsided? Are all sides even in terms of materials? Does one side look heavier or fuller than another? Then view your design from the side, like take it and put it on the table and you squat down and look at it from the side. Take a photo from there too. It should look like a half a basketball from the side. View your design at eye level, so pick it up, put it up to eye level, turn it around. Ask yourself, are there any mechanics showing? Can you see any foam? Can you see any tape? If there are mechanics showing, you should use filler and greens to make those disappear. That's a huge part of just being a better designer than the next person, is to make sure you make all your mechanics disappear. All right, here's a final photo of our sample design. So how does yours compare? Go ahead and turn in your photos, and remember you will make one more of these for practice. And so the next time we have class, please bring whatever questions you have, any challenges that you had that you want to overcome before you start the next one. Bring your design, if at all possible, to class if we're meeting soon so that we can actually see it. And I hope you enjoy your flowers. Please wait to start your next design until we evaluate how this first one went. Thank you.